Cole, that's the best introduction I've ever had. Thank you. Well, good morning, men, and it's great to see you today. Welcome back to Man to Man, Session 9, our ninth session of our 10-week journey into manhood. And we've had a great experience together, haven't we? It's really been a wonderful time, and thank you for your prompt attendance and for the enthusiasm you've shown. 4 weeks ago, we laid out God's timeless definition of manhood from the pages of Genesis. Do you remember that? A universal vision of masculinity that I believe that God intended for all men. And we summarized it in just 4 distinct phrases: that a real man was a man who surrendered himself to God and His Word. He loved and protected, or he will love and protect the women and the woman that's around him. He will excel at God's work, and then he will better God's world. I believe from Genesis that's the manhood for all time and for all ages. And we looked at that a few weeks ago. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at the first of those markers, those marks of manhood, and that is surrendering to God and His Word. And we looked at it because we discussed what it meant to believe in Jesus and have a real faith. And we kind of laid that out. And we also looked at the 2 key moves for every man to live a vibrant and healthy spiritual life. We said it was important that he had a team of spiritually engaged men around him that he could share with, and that he also needed to have time spent with God in His Word. Those were the 2 things that would bring a man spiritually alive. Then last week, we explored the second mark of manhood, that second key statement of loving and protecting a woman. And we said that we were able to do that by taking the enduring wisdom of Ephesians and live out that 3-pronged challenge that the apostle gave us for being the kind of man that women need. And that is that a man was to be an emotional connector, he was to be a standard bearer, and he was to be a financial provider. In other words, with his woman, he was to help his woman feel loved. That's what emotional connector does. He helps his wife feel loved. And I hope you guys have a new awareness of how significant that is. Her number 1 need in life is to feel emotionally connected to you. A standard bearer where she feels safe because you're the guy who says, honey, I'll carry the values of our home and make sure that these are the things that define us as a marriage and as a family. And also a financial provider. That's the man who makes his wife feel free, where she has options to be all that God meant for her to be at whatever season of life that was. I hope, by the way, that you came in here today very clear about your wife's love language. Okay? And maybe even that she got a bonus sticky note somewhere along the way in the days before us. Now today what we want to do is to look at the third mark of enduring manhood, and that is what it means for a guy to excel at his work. And you know, there are times that work itself makes us laugh. In fact, I brought a sheet of little quotes, memos sent out from company headquarters to its employees, and they have a little humor to them. First of all, this is from Microsoft. It sent this memo to employees. It said, as of tomorrow, employees will only be able to access the building using individual security cards. Employees will receive their cards in 2 weeks. This is from UPS. This project is so important we can't let things that are more important interfere with it. And then finally from AT&T, we know that communication is a problem here, but this company is not going to discuss it with its employees. Yeah, work can make us laugh, but at the same time, work can be painful. And it can be exasperating. And sometimes work not only doesn't make us laugh, it can make us cry. Like when your boss doesn't have a clue what you're capable of. And over time you discover he doesn't even care. Or you're being suffocated by an unrelenting micromanager who is over you all the time and you never seem to can measure up. He's always checking every little detail and he's suffocating you. Or you hate what you do, but you're also scared to death, even this morning, to make a change. Or you wonder why you're not more appreciated or valued or noticed in your work. Or when you say to yourself, you know, I'm succeeding here. I'm doing good. So why aren't I happy? Why do I get up every day and this just feels like a grind? And I don't really want to be here, even though I'm doing well. Any of those statements connect with anybody here today? Where you feel some of that undercurrent in your life, in the world of work? The truth is, for all of us here today, work is a big deal. It's a really big deal. So I want to look just for a moment, and you can follow along with your outline, some quick facts about men and work. Here's the first one. Most men define themselves by what they do. Isn't that true? We meet someone new and we're talking, maybe you met someone here today new, and one of the first things you ask them is, hey, what do you do? And you let them kind of describe what work they do. Or we see an old friend years later and we ask them, hey, what are you doing now? We use work to kind of be the cornerstone of our identity, who we are. It's also how we measure guys, by what they do. And often it's how we pick our friends. We men define ourselves by what we do. Secondly, men spend more time in the workplace than anywhere else. They spend the time in the workplace more than anywhere else. Generally, you spend about 60 to 65% of all your time in the workplace. 30 to 35% of your time with family and personal interest, and maybe 5 to 10% of your time in community and church activities. That's how guys' time life falls out with these different categories. So more than anything else, when you think about us, we're workers. Number 3, according to a Gallup survey, a majority of men feel miscast in their jobs. I remember I had dinner one day with George Gallup, and he was on this subject at the time. He was writing a book and and doing some testing work about men and how they engage the workplace. Astoundingly, he found that 50% of all workers in his survey are not, and this is his words, are not personally engaged in their jobs. And what that means is they go to work, you'll go to work, but a lot of you guys may not have any passion for what you do. It's just a job. 50%. And on top of that, he found that another 22% of workers go even further than that. They go to work, but they are actively, these are his words, disengaged with their jobs. Meaning, at work, I do as little as I can get away with. I'm in this thing not for anything other than a paycheck, so I'm not going to do anything that I have to do or anything above what's required of me. I'm just kind of distant from my employment as far as my interest. So work for that guy becomes a have to. Now, when you put 50% with 22%, that means 72% of all male workers in America go to their workplace, and for them, the job is just something they exist in, or their job is something that they emotionally resist. That's today's workforce, which leads to number 4. Men today increasingly want more than a job and a paycheck. What men really want is purpose in their work. Now, the good news, because a lot of man-to-man is tilted towards you guys who are categorized as millennials. One of the things that's good about this millennial generation is you want to work, but you want your work to have meaning and purpose. And all the surveys indicate that. Forbes Business Magazine actually calls today's new business culture with millennials the age of meaning. And I think that's a really good thing. Take Tom's Shoes, for example. It's now not called Tom's Shoes, it's just called Tom's because they sell more than shoes. If you go to their official website, the first thing that comes up is the logo that says 1 to 1. And then these words, and I'm quoting, "With every product you purchase here at Tom's, you will help one person in need, 1 to 1. Now that's a company who understands that they're in the age of meaning and that their employees want more than just a paycheck. They want purpose. Which is why, by the way, the Bible is so relevant. Because you know what? It didn't take just a recent generation of millennials to say that. The Bible has been saying that work needs to have meaning and purpose for over 2,000 years. It calls for work to have something that is valued, that has want to with it, where you can go to work to make a difference, not just get a paycheck, where you can help people, where you can serve God, not just serve yourself. You see, God knew from the beginning, from the very beginning in Genesis, that work was not to be for profit only. Because when work is for profit only, it hardens the heart. But when work has a noble purpose attached to it, what it will do is it'll bring workers alive. It'll bring a man alive. He'll look forward to getting up on Monday morning with the work that's ahead of him. Fifth, the future is setting up to be difficult, especially when it comes to men and work. Now we're kind of forecasting out the next 20, 30, 40 years. I read an interesting book by Nicholas Eberstadt. His book was entitled Men Without Work. And he's forecasting that in the future, unemployment is going to rise significantly, especially among prime age working males. And prime age means between 25 years old and 50 years old. He said that's growing and you can expect it to continue to grow. He says, and these are his words, the disappearance of millions of American men from the labor force will be one of the great economic problems of our age. In fact, he says by 2050, 33% of all working age males, 25 to 50, will be unemployed. And you go, whoa, 33%. Why? Here are the reasons he cited. First, technology and robotics. So many men have been employed since the founding of America because of their brawn, not just their brains. There's hard things to do in construction and the automobile industry and plumbing and electrical and building and construction. We guys are drawn to certain things because of our physical abilities. And yet robots are going to have an unbelievable impact in the next 20 to 40 years. I mean, can you say Watson? Can you say Alexa? Every time I say it, it comes on in our house. And then ask me what I want to do. Can you say Android? I was stunned when I read the other day that by next year, there'll be 14 million new robots in our factories, replacing men. Robotics and technology is going to be one of the reasons that it's going to be a challenge for young men especially. Secondly is education. In the world of education, women are being educated at a far higher rate than males. And yet the employments of the future, the good employments of the future, are going to require greater levels of education. And men are unprepared for it. They're falling behind in huge numbers. Thirdly, surprisingly, one of the reasons men will be unemployed is because of marriage. Did you know that for the first time in American history, there are more singles in America than there are married people? And as marriage rates fall off, for whatever reason, we could talk about this later, but for whatever reason, it has a pacifying effect on men. Marriage has a civilizing effect on men. And when men are married, there's a natural motivation to engage that new family I have and to make financial contributions to it and step up to higher levels of responsibility. But just the opposite happens when they're not married, and more men are not married. Living with women, yes, but not married. And when they do that, there's a natural kind of energy drain when it comes to responsibility and work. They go together. So the less men are married, the less men step up to responsibility in regards to employment. So I want to just kind of maybe pause here for a second. Just a little word of advice, because there's so many young guys in the room. Let me tell you, if you're a young guy in the room and you have a young son like Cole, I would urge you to think on two things. First, I would urge you to push your sons in school as it regards education. We do it pretty well naturally with athletics, but you need to be pushing your son with education. You, not your wife, needs to be the one constantly just using the natural vocabulary of the home to constantly be reminding why it's so important to have education. Let them see the future through you as regards to education. When they're doing a math class or a science project or whatever, keep tying the future together with their activity in regards to schoolwork, and let them know that the future is going to be given to those who are academically qualified. And he doesn't meet those standards, you can tell him it's going to be a hard road in the future. But you need to encourage and celebrate good grades. Read books. Talk about interesting things. But you guys need to be pushing, I'm just telling you, pushing your sons educationally. The second thing you need to do is you need to make marriage attractive to your boys. You need to talk about how much you love your wife, and doing those little things like love language and sticky notes needs to be reminding these boys that marriage is a good thing. And talk to them about what that's going to mean to walk through life with a woman, and how much she contributes, and how much you're looking forward to them one day having a woman of their own that they can partner with and make a difference with in the future generation. You hold up those two things, you're going to give your sons some incredible gifts, because marriage will motivate them in the world of work and responsibility, and education will give them a platform to succeed. But if your main focus is to make them the star point guard on the AAU team, I'm just telling you guys, you're making a big mistake. Just remember those two things in regards to your boys. The sixth and final thing is this. Work is a major topic of the Bible. You know, I think it's funny when you open the Bible, the first verse, you see God working. Here's what it says. In the beginning, God was creating the heavens and the earth. He was about work. He was about doing things, making things happen, bringing things into existence. And then He created us as men. And even before He created a woman, He put us to work. He took the first man, the woman was still out there, put him in a garden, gave him a job description, told him to care and make this thing better, and set him into the workplace. And then He even gave him a promise of promotion. You do a good job here, Adam. After a while, these are God's words, you will rule and subdue the earth. As a worker, as a person who's about doing things that I'm about doing, and I want you to join me in that. That's what you see in the first two chapters of Genesis. Then thousands of years later, the Apostle Paul comes down and lays down what I think is kind of a cornerstone principle about work in Colossians chapter 3. And here's what he says. He says, whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. Now guys, just look at the verse for a second. Let's just pick it apart, because in this is what later created, or at least exploded, the Protestant work ethic, which really changed Europe and ultimately changed us as a country and made us the preeminent nation of the world because of our understanding of work. Now, you may not understand that, but you can do some research on that. It's amazing. But a lot of it came right from this place. And this verse says to us these things. First, all work is important to God. The opening statement is, whatever you do, God's interested in that. Secondly, it says, all work is working for God. The last line says, when you're at the workplace, really, if you understand what you're about and how you got here and how you're gifted, it is the Lord Christ whom you really serve today at the job. Third, all work should get my best. Notice the phrase, do your work heartily. That's a Greek word that expresses intense emotion and energy and enthusiasm. Go after your job. Make it something you're excited about. And do it where it makes things happen. And then lastly, it says in this verse, all work done rightly will be rewarded by God. It says the reward of the inheritance. That inheritance is speaking not just of a paycheck. It's speaking of a standard. It's speaking of a name. It's speaking of the reward of a reputation, of a skill, of a master craftsman who not only does well in that workplace, but those benefits that come by doing work well before God then spill over even into the community for the common good. I just want you to see, work from Genesis on is a major topic of the Bible. So in light of these quick facts, let me ask two big questions. Here are the two big questions we want to look at today. How does a man, or let me just, as I look at you guys, how do you find the right job for you? And then secondly, how does a man really excel at work? Is there a framework for excelling? I think there is. So we want to try to address those two questions. First, in finding the right job. How do you find the right fit, especially in light of Gallup statements that most men don't really passionately engage their work? They're just kind of there. Here's three things that I think are really important when it comes, or two things when it comes to a right job fit. First, you must know who you are. That's bedrock, principle number one. Because you want a job that fits you. It's tailored to your strengths, to your personality, and to your passions. So the question is, how do you find a job like that fits me? Nobody ever gave me a map to do that, to match me with a career. A lot of us just went to college clueless about our major. I certainly did. I don't know how you went to college, but I went to college, and I just picked out the first thing and started, and then just guessed my way through college, which was a big mistake. But I was sitting with a group of elite high school students up in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Charlotte Latin School. And we were at the Duke Center. And we were sitting around a table, and I asked each one of these guys who were just about to graduate, what are you going to do when you go to college? What kind of major are you going to pursue? And every one of them, these elite students, told me, well, I don't know. Dad told me I ought to major in business. And I thought, they're just finishing the Charlotte Latin School, and they're going to guess their way into their freshman year in college. That's how most guys do it. We guess. But there are three practical ways you can kind of help you get some perspective on who you are and how that matches with a career. Here's the first. You ought to look at your past experiences. Look at your past experiences. In other words, every one of us here have had a little track record in life, some more than others, but you need to look back over your life and ask yourself, this is the key question, where have I most felt alive? Especially in work. In what setting? Do I feel really alive being out or in an office? Do I feel most alive, with my mind or with my hands or with my imagination? Doing what? What are things where I was doing? I said, man, I really like this. Just really like this. See, it's good for a man just to think, first of all, what are the things that really excite me? I might not know what that means as far as a career, but I can know where I'm at and what really engages me. That's what you want to ask, because that shouts your passion. That shouts what you like to do. And in every one of those come alive moments, you're getting a little hint at your future. You know, I told you I was kind of clueless going through school and stuff like that. And I've had to look back, but I've asked this question over and over again as I kind of stumble my way forward in graduate school. And I remember I was at Lewis and Clark College in Oregon, and I was majoring in counseling psychology. And one day I was going through one of the thousands of hours of counseling practice. And I was sitting there with this young anorexic woman, talking to her about her life. And inside I was just going, I hate this. I mean, she needed somebody who cared. And I want to go tackle some project, get some guys together and go take a hill, you know. And she was talking, and I go, I'm just about to graduate. I hate this. So I quit. But it made me ask some questions about what do I really like? What do I want to do with my life? And you know, I've found I can boil all of it down into two statements about what I really love. One, I love gathering people together to do something they're going to enjoy. I can go all the way back when I was a 10-year-old, going out, my family had a big lot behind our house, big flat lot. And I can remember going in and filling up bags of my mom's flour into a bag and going out in that big lot and lining it off and creating a football field, you know, with 10-yard markers and all that, and then setting up some sticks for goal posts, and then getting all the neighborhood kids and playing football in the fall. I can remember carving that out and making a baseball field because I like bringing people together to have fun together, to do something that was enjoyable. And secondly, I've always loved teaching or talking to people to help them get more successful. So do you understand why I'm here? Nobody's paying me for this. Nobody's saying, hey, you got to get up and go to your job at 4 a.m. over at the Embassy Suites. No, you know why I do this? Because I love it. I love it. I love getting guys together, having a good time, but being helped to get better in your life, because when you get better, I feel like I've fulfilled my work calling before God. Second thing you can do, you can employ, not with money, but just by invitation, what I call wise, objective counselors. People who can see you for who and what you really are. People who give you honest feedback. And you can go talk to them and ask them who you are, pro and con, what you're good at, but also ask them what you're not good at. They can just kind of help give you some good, honest encouragement in that regard. And by the way, not family members, not mom and dad, brothers and sisters. Those people cannot see you objectively. They're too close. You need people further away. People maybe that were good friends, or somebody maybe you've even worked with for a while, where you just simply say, hey, tell me, how do you see me? What do you think I do? What do I do best? What are the things that you see that I struggle in? How would you place me if you were giving me a job and you could give me any job you wanted? I think it's really good just to ask people for some honest feedback. I think we're afraid of that oftentimes because we don't want to hear what we're not. So we resist asking that question. And yet the Scripture, the wisdom of enduring wisdom, the Scripture, it keeps telling us you should have some consultants around you, friends who can give you honest feedback. For instance, in Proverbs 11:14, it says this, where there is no guidance, a man falls down. But in an abundance of counselors, there's always victory. See, we need people around us who can give us objective feedback. We need to be able to ask them questions about ourselves and listen to what they say, even if inside there's this instinct to want to defend ourselves if they say something we don't like. But you know what? Life is going to hammer away at us until we finally admit the truth of who we are and who we're not. Third, I think this is a huge move, especially in our modern times. For a right job fit, you need to use what I call objective aptitude testing. Now look at your outline for just a moment. I've listed an aptitude testing center. It's called AIMS on your outline. But let me just explain just for a moment what aptitude testing is about. One, it's not intelligence testing. It's not the ACT or the SAT. It's not necessarily personality testing in that regard. It's a more holistic look at who you are. And there are testing centers like that around the country. One of the best is in Dallas, Texas, called AIMS, and you can go check them out with that website that's on your outline. I put it there because I've used it extensively with my kids and some friends. But what AIMS does is it takes a composite of things, like you as a puzzle piece. It's your natural desires, things, your passions that you just naturally like to do, matches and integrates that with strengths that you have, true strengths in an objective way measured against the rest of the population. And then things that you just naturally just enjoy, and then it takes that information and prints that out in kind of a composite and matches it with careers, and here's the key, careers that you would be good at, but that you would also enjoy. And I've used that for my kids right when they graduated from high school. Every one of them went to Dallas, did AIMS. You can do it as a 40-year-old, 50-year-old. I just sent a couple of guys off in their 40s who hate their jobs. And I said, we need some objective information. And I've sent others like that, like my kids, and they come back and they have this composite of information matched to a series of careers that AIMS will guarantee you if you worked any of those jobs, you would like it. But you'd also be good at it. And one of the testimonies I can give is one of the reasons one of my sons is a doctor and another is a commercial real estate developer and my daughter has her own company is because when they sat as 17-year-olds with the AIMS counselor said, you know, you would really love being a commercial real estate developer. Whatever you do, don't work in an office. You need to be out and about doing, because you're a natural extrovert deal maker who enjoys being with people. My son was sitting there going, well, what is that? You know? But she said, well, you need to go to the University of Arkansas and major in this and that and align yourself with your strengths so that when you finish college, you'll have the skills, the education necessary to do these jobs, one of which is a commercial real estate developer. And here we are, a number of years later, and that's what my son does. And he loves it. Just like my other son that I met with the other day, loves being a physician. But you know where I got that information? I got it because I'm a really smart dad. No. I didn't have a clue. I got it because somebody on the outside gave us objective information on the inside that we could use to rightly align our lives with careers. So use that as aptitude testing. So guys, we need to know, let me tell you, it's so critical to know who you are. And those three things will be helpful. But it also goes along with what also it says to you. When you start learning about who you are, it helps you, and this is a little more difficult, admit who you're not. Who you're not. We need to know who we're not. I'm old enough now to have watched a number of men, even friends, spend a good portion of their life chasing dead ends. That somewhere along life's road it just didn't work anymore. The salesman who's not a salesman. The leader who kept telling himself, I'm a leader, but everybody around knew he wasn't a leader. But it was important to him that he could be, but he wasn't. That wasn't his fit. The store manager who became the store manager because it was Dad's store. So he suffered there through his 20s and 30s. Or the lawyer who became a lawyer just because Dad said you'd earn a lot of money. All of those are misfits, not fits. But then after years of expense and effort, going through 3 or 4 majors in college and then 3 or 4 jobs in your 20s and 30s and still just kind of grinding in circles and stuff, a guy comes to this terrifying moment when he says, this is not me. But then the terrifying feeling inside that says, well, what are you going to do? And there's still no answers. No man should be there. And there are helps to not be there if you want to take advantage of it. We need to know who we are and who we're not. I've got a good friend here living in Little Rock who's helped me in a number of things, even like man to man. His name is Rick Campbell. And Rick is a guy that when he was growing up, because he's really smart and he's really engaging, he's always been put in positions of leadership in junior high and high school, in college, and then when he got out, he went to law school, and then he ended up the CEO of a very prominent law firm here in Little Rock. And I remember years ago as we talked and stuff, he just told me, he said, I just kind of feel like my job is a grind. And so he got in a group of guys where they began to talk about their fit, their personality, how they better engage. And he kept telling the guys, I've always been told I'm a leader, I'm leading at the company, I'm doing all this stuff, but I just don't like it. So he took some testing and did some interaction with friends that knew him closely, and one day made this huge admission to himself and then later to us. He said, you know what? I'm not a leader. I don't enjoy leading. I always get put in that position because of my abilities, but I don't like it. And then he took the courageous step of just saying, here's what I know I love. I love helping people and encouraging people. And when I'm in leadership like that, I don't get the opportunity much to do that. So at midlife, at the top of his game, he went to the law firm and resigned as CEO. And said, if you can have me, here's what I want you to put me in. I want you to put me in a position where I can work with young lawyers, and this is his new term for himself, where I can be a helper, encourager. And because of his skills and his abilities and because of his reputation, they said no problem. And they made that move. And it changed a lot of what he did at the law firm. But as the other day when we were talking, he said, you know, I've never ever regretted saying who I'm not. So at this stage in my life, I can become before God who He really created me to be, a helper and an encourager. So guys, here are some very practical steps for finding the right job. Looking back on your life, what brought you alive, looking to guys around you or places around you that can give you some objective feedback, and then that aptitude testing. And you need to use those. And even if right now you're at 45 years old and some of this is hitting you and going, you know, I don't know if I'm a right fit, then I want you to be courageous and take the steps. This would be a great action step for being a man. To begin to, not quit your job necessarily, but to begin to move to find out who you are and who you're not. Because you don't want to stay in a job just because of the money, or just because of dad, or just because you're afraid. You don't want to do that. In fact, I'll give you kind of a warning. You can write this down on your sheet, and it's this. Never say, I'm trapped in my job. I've had guys tell me that. I'm trapped in my job. No, you're not. You're not. You're only trapped in your own mind. And if you need to make a move, then make a move. So, those are some ways of finding the right fit. Now, how does a man excel in work? Well, we're going to consult the enduring wisdom of Scripture, and it's got all kinds of advice peppered through the pages of the Bible that just kind of remind us, how does a man who knows who he is before God and what his gifts are, how does he step up and really excel in the workplace? How would you step up and succeed in your workplace right now? Let me just give you 5 things. We could mention 10, 15 of these, but I've just selected 5. Here's the first. Don't just work, but work to be really good at something. Remember, do your work heartily as unto the Lord. Listen to the wisdom of Proverbs 22:29. It says this, do you see a man skilled in his work? If you see a guy who's skilled in his work, let me tell you something about him. He will stand before kings. He will stand out. It's really what it's saying. He will not stand before obscure men. He will not be hidden in the company. He'll stand out. To help pay his way through graduate school, my brother, who was working to be a professor, decided he needed to have some employment to help pay for his graduate education. So he just went down and took a job at a construction site. And he did that for a few months, and one of the guys noticed him because my brother is a hard worker, but he asked my brother what he'd like to do, and he said, well, he'd been noticing this tile work that they were doing. He'd love to know more about ceramic tile and laying certain designs and patterns in homes and stuff. So this guy kind of took him under his wing. And after a while, my brother began to learn that skill at a higher and higher level. That's the way he said it. He said, I worked hard at it at first, then I became good at it. And then here's what I know. After a while after that, he became known for it. And before he finished graduate school, he had these high-income home builders asking him if he would come in and do these jobs on these million-dollar homes in Denver, Colorado. And when he finished graduate school and he became a professor, we used to laugh because he could earn more on weekends than he could earn as a salary being a professor. So he kept doing both and became known all over the city for the kind of designs and craftsmanship that he had now the ability to do. He stood out at that. And he became known around town as a master craftsman. My friend Bob Beal, who's a business consultant, says there are two ways that we as men make a name for ourselves at work. One is by working hard and just being promoted slowly up through the company, and that's one way of being recognized. But he said the other way is even quicker. The other way is by being sought out in your job because you've learned to do better than anyone else what you're at. You've learned to do it really well, and people have noticed. I want you to think of any job. Think of the guy who is in furniture refinishing, or the guy who is in photography, or the dentist, or the auto mechanic, or the hunting guide, or the home builder, or the tax attorney. You mention any of those trades, and somewhere in every one of those trades is what I call the man. The man. The man that people, when you ask, hey, who's good at doing this? They will say, well, you know, there's a lot of different companies you can go to, but I know this guy because he stands out. I just recently did some repainting in one of the rooms in our house. My wife wanted to do some repainting. And, you know, I can go to the Yellow Pages and look at all different kinds of companies that do painting, but I just kind of started asking around with my friends a painter that they would recommend. And a name kept coming up to the top over and over again. Said, hey, if you get this guy, he's really good. So I called him. And he came out, and you know what he did? He did a great job. Because you know who he is? He's the man. He really is the man. So here's my question to you. Since you're going to have to work today, just a little while, you're going to go back to the workplace, why not be really good at what you do? Maybe even have a goal to be one of the best at what you do. It's a great way to establish your name. Here's the second thing the Scripture says. Be responsive to those above you and earn their trust. Be responsive to those above you, whoever they are. I mean, if you're the company president, you have to worry about this, except to God. But if you're somewhere below that, you've got somebody who's watching you. And do you know what employers and managers hunger for more than anything else in the workforce today? Listen, it's to find an employee who will faithfully and accurately execute the plans that they've been given. Anybody who leads men in a job is always looking out for the guy that when we say we want to do it this way, and they come back and it's done exactly that way, or maybe even a little better, but there was no veering off of that, and there was no, incorrect approach to that, that guy is so encouraging to management. Because responsiveness on the job always catches the eye of employers. It makes an employer say to his management team, now you know Pete down there? That's a guy we can trust. That's a guy who follows through. That's a guy that's a team player. That's a guy who appreciates authority. He doesn't chafe against it. He doesn't always think he's got the better idea. I mean, he may have a better idea, but he doesn't use that and then just kind of grate against the company, even though he might have something better. He's the guy that we can trust with the plans that we gave him. There'll be follow through. And you know what comments like that do for you as an employee in the company? It adds credibility to who you are. It makes you get noticed. It makes you become valued by the company, because responsiveness always gets a hearing as an employee, and often it gets a promotion. On the other hand, I just want you guys to know, if you're in a job you don't like, even if you don't like it, if you then disengage and you become somebody who they're always having to come back and check on and point out that you need to do this a little bit different because you're just kind of going through the motions, you wear management out when you're like that. The guy who always questions authority under his breath, always has a better idea, always turns to the other employees and says, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He may not. But that's not why you're there. You're there to do it the way they said to do it. Who always has an excuse for not fully following through. That guy wears management out. On the other hand, I like the imagery of Proverbs 25:13. Here's what it says. A faithful employee is as invigorating as a cool day in the hot summertime. He refreshes the soul of his boss. And let me tell you, the boss loves that. As one who's been a leader of a lot of people, I can tell you there's nothing that refreshes you more than an employee who wants to get it done the way you told him. But nothing creates greater pain than one who doesn't act like that. So I tell you that because for you young men, if you want to move up and move up well and then get in a place where you can lead, it's good to do it the way you've been told. Here's a third way. Over-deliver. Over-deliver. Proverbs 10:4 says it this way. Poor is he who works with lazy hands, but hard-working hands always gets rich. There are clearly two kinds of work standards. And you're going to have on the job this week, two different employees performing one or the other of these two work standards. Both are acceptable, by the way. But one runs at a higher burn rate than the other and is better. The first way of working is what I call being good enough. Good enough. I'm good enough. I did what they said. I did what's expected, and that's okay. But then there's another guy, maybe working next to you. He's got a work standard that's a little higher. It's called over-delivering. Because his work is not only good enough, but it's peppered in different ways. The way he goes about his job, it's peppered with little extras that go over and beyond what is asked for. Over-delivering is a chosen mindset of bringing your A game to your workspace. It's a mindset that actually enjoys doing for the customer something beyond, something a little better, something that gives a little bit more, and then is commented on as being outstanding. It's that creative spirit that a worker brings into the marketplace that loves to surprise people and encourage people by just going a little further than what the person who's paying for that expected. Whether it be staying an hour late to make sure the job is done better than right, or consistently beating a deadline, or coming in under budget, or doing a few extras for a person. Or surprising the customer when maybe you did the brake job and it was okay, but they came back and they said something wasn't quite right, and rather than just complain or put it off, you actually redid it and did it the way they needed it to be done. It's giving out bonuses as a boss that you didn't have to. I met a guy who his company loved him, and he made the decision that he was not just, they had a very successful business, but they made a huge profit, and rather than take any of it, he gave it to everyone in the company. You think they love him? Oh yeah. They love him because he showed them how valuable they were. It's following up to make sure the repairs that you did were done right. It's asking people, even as they come to pick up whatever they bought from you or whatever you're trying to sell them, is there anything else I can help you with? It's writing handwritten notes to clients. And on and on and on it goes. I call them extras. It's over-delivering. You want to make a name for yourself? Then you're just not good enough. You're better than good enough. And you win at work. Here's a fourth proven practice. Be an encourager and team builder. In 1 Thessalonians 5:11, Paul says this. He says, encourage one another and build up one another just as you are doing. In other words, you bring a positive energy into the marketplace. And in particular, you got to watch how you use your mouth, because your mouth it's got the ability to give good things or bad things. But if you are an encourager, you're going to be one who unites by the things you say. When unexpected difficulties come, rather than just complain about it, you're the person who's offering hope. We can get it done. You're trying to help other people rally to the cause. You're the problem solver, or at least you want to help people engage the problem. But you can choose another path just as easy. You can be the problem creator. You can be the divider rather than the uniter with your mouth. Because the workplace can be a place of division or it can be a place of synergy. Here's what Paul says in Ephesians 4. He says, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for the building up of one another according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Don't you love walking into a place where people are uplifting, where there's smiles, there's encouragement, where there's energy? That's where I'd want to work. But when people gather in the coffee room and it's just a complaint session, the whole DNA of the company starts going into the toilet. It's not fun to be there. Even if you're doing the job you were designed for, the atmosphere becomes toxic. And by the way, the sales tend to go down in that kind of environment. But it starts, if you're a guy who's a worker for God, it starts with me and what I do and what I offer and what I give, not just what I get. The Scripture would say, be an encourager. And then the fifth practice would be this: keep your word. That's really big. And I tell you that because one of the things I've noticed, both in my work and with people I've employed, is they don't keep their word. In fact, I've gotten almost cynical when I've talked to somebody about doing something. They said, yeah, we'll do it. We'll come out and take an estimate next week and stuff like that. And then they'll finish with something like this. Hey, would you remind me by calling me next week? When that person says that, I just write them off. Because I already know they're not going to help me. They're not interested really in me. But keep your word. Jesus said in Matthew 5, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Just period. Do that. And then when applied to work, that means when you say you're going to be there, be there. And if you're not interested in the job and you're not going to be there, then tell them, I appreciate you calling me. I can't do that. Let them know. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. When you say you'll pay, you pay. When you make a commitment, you follow through. When you say you're going to get it done, it doesn't matter how long it takes. You get it done. And you do it when you said you were going to do it. Because you're representing not the company, if you understand what a real man is. You're representing the God of the universe and His reputation by who you are. The Scripture commends the man. I remember reading this, who makes a promise and then realizes that promise is going to be hard to do. It's the guy who gives an estimate and signs a contract and then realizes prices have inflated, and if I do this job the way I promised this customer I'd do it, I'm not going to make any money. Or this is going to take a lot longer than I said. I overstated how quickly I could get it done, and now it's going to be difficult. And now you find yourself in this moral quagmire. What you do, you can kind of excuse your way out of it, ease your way out of it by not being responsible, talk about things that maybe aren't even true to give yourself a little cushion, or you can follow through. But this scripture has always meant something to me. Psalms 15:4. Here's what it says. This is just talking about the worker. He swears to his own hurt, yet he does not change. I said I'd do it, so I'm going to do it, even if it hurts me. The psalm goes on to say, that's the man that God blesses. I remember years ago when I was just starting out, God taught me how important that was. We had moved to a new city in Portland, and we needed transition jobs during the summer. And we had a small amount of money, just kind of cushion our way through that. But again, it was very difficult to get employment. And I remember in this, because we had all kinds of job issues when I went to graduate school, but I remember this, when we first got to Portland, we didn't know anybody. I figured I had enough to make it for a couple of months. That got down to about $100. And so we were thinking, man, we got to keep getting out there, honey, finding something just to tide us over for a couple of months before school started. And that night after we had talked about that, we had a little dachshund that was my wife and I's favorite dog, little Casey. And I remember Casey woke us up, jumped up in the bed and was shaking. And I could tell something was really wrong. And I didn't know what to do. It just got into town. So I looked up in the yellow pages. There was a veterinarian. It was 10 o'clock at night. I called him. He was pretty gruff on the phone. I said, well, I think my dog he's really ill. Can you please help us? And this guy said, well, listen, I'll meet you at my clinic, but it's going to cost you. And I said, okay. He was about a mile away. We jumped in the car with little Casey, went down there. He met us there. I gave Casey to him. He said, well, he'll work on him and call us in the morning. He said, but that's going to be $65. Well, we had like 100, this is in the 70s, to kind of carry us over for 2 or 3 weeks. So I said, okay. So the next morning I called to see how Casey was. He said, well, Casey died last night. He said, are you going to pay me? Now, he had never seen me before. He didn't know where I lived. And I thought, I got $100 and I'm going to pay $65 for a dead dog? We were right here. But I remember I drove out to his clinic, my wife and I did. And I walked into his office, Dr. Estep. I said, I'm here to pay for my dog. I remember he was shocked. And he looked at me and said, I can't believe you're going to pay me. He said, I've been a vet here for a number of years. And he said, I have people who, things like this happen, never show up. I never see them again, can't find them. I try to hound them. They never follow through. So I paid him the $65. And as I was writing out the check, he said, hey, what do you do? I said, I don't do anything. I'm looking for some summer employment. And I remember he looked at me just for a second. He said, you got one here. He said, I need some help. That's how we made it. But we made it by being blessed because we kept our word. And let me tell you, you're going to make a name for yourself, a real name, where people smile when they think of you and what you do, you'll keep your word too. So how does a man excel at work? You know, it's critical that we ask that question. Because work, guys, listen, most of what we are and will do in this life is in the workplace. It's critical to our manhood, and we need to be in the right place. Every guy in this room needs, maybe not right now, but needs to find the right place. And to do that, We must know with good, trustworthy, and objective facts who we are, how God has designed us, and we also need to know who we're not. And then be fearless after we get that information to find a job that really fits us, so that our work is more than just work. It's more than just a job. It's become a calling that we know we've been designed by our Creator to be. And we must also let the Scriptures coach us. And we just listen to a few of those. I'd love for you to go to the Scriptures and find other encouragements of how to work well. But we've talked about a few that we could be coached, and they are these. We need to work to be really good at something, responsive to those over us. We need to over-deliver. We need to go beyond good enough. We need to be an encourager and team builder. And we need to be dependable. We need to keep our word. This, guys, is how a man, it's how a man excels at work. And listen, and in the end, he not only blesses others by excelling at work, but this is the good news. You do what we talked about this morning, and you bless yourself with a good and satisfying life. Okay, Man-to-Man, Session 9. We'll look forward to our next session, our finish line session, next week, guys.